Hi, guys, and welcome back to another day of the Adventures of Young Kalam with me, Stuti. The lockdown continues, and so do our readings. The last we left it at Professor Ramachandran coming to the rescue when Kalam and his friends were being punished by his class teacher, Punakai, and Professor Ramachandran telling Kalam that he's going to see him in the evening. Now, we don't know why he's going to see him, but we'll find out today in chapter 5. So, let's do it. Kalam heard Professor Ramachandran sing an off-tuned Tagore melody as he climbed the rickety iron staircase to the shack on the sticks that the professor called his home for their evening round of experiments. With their shared love for science, Kalam had formed a close bond with the professor. The hours spent at the professor's one room home overlooking the school were filled with dreams, discoveries, explorations, and explosions. When the two weren't busy inventing, they would talk endlessly of science, literature, music, and the big world. And every time Kalam left to go back home, his brains would be bubbling with thought, his ears peaked with ideas, and his eyes lost in wonder. How he wished to be Professor Ramachandran. It's open, rang the professor's voice before Kalam could knock. Good evening, sir, chirped Kalam, his latest pressure rocket model dragging behind in his trolley. So you finally finished, said Professor Ramachandran, getting up. The professor, although fairly old, looked young in his bright checkered shirt and lungi. His cheerful manner took many years off his thick white bush of hair, and his face gleamed with curiosity, just like Kalam's. So I'd said I will introduce you to Professor Ramachandran, and that is Professor Ramachandran. That. Okay. Yes, the model is ready. I've designed a simple hand pump from a bamboo stick to create air pressure inside the rocket. The parachute is tied on top to be thrown open, and the stand is working perfectly too. But Professor Ramachandran believed in teaching his students to find answers for themselves. But his flight is wobbly. I think I've got the fins wrong. Let me see. So that is Kalam's sketch of the pressure rocket. So that's a bamboo stick to create the pressure, which goes up, and there's liquid, which is presumably water, and that creates pressure, which throws open and out the rocket. So he says, let me see. After a quick look and explanation of the center of gravity, he looked up to Kalam, hoping he'd have found a solution already. So, if I move the fins a little closer to the tail, it would increase stability. And a narrower fin would ensure better flight. Why don't you try that to see if it works? Smiled Professor Ramachandran, patting Kalam on his back. Looks like Kalam had got his right answer. Now come along, I have to show you the final results of a months-long experiment. Kalam quickly put aside his rocket and jumped up, following the professor to the dark corner of the room. The two picked up the table that stood jauntily on its 3.5 legs, dropping a lot of things in the process, and moved it aside. The floor revealed a trapdoor with a "Do Not Enter, Danger" sign painted on it. Professor Ramachandran jerked it open, and a fluorescent light washed over the two. They climbed down a narrow ladder into a square room, Professor Ramachandran bending low to avoid hitting his head on the ceiling. A wooden slab ran around the room, crowded with glass flasks and funnels of all shapes and sizes, filled with the strangest of things: wiggling worms, silvery powder, pills of all colors, dried branches and leaves, vines, creepy crawlies, and lines of liquid, splashing, sparkling, hissing, and boiling. There were jars each with its own detailed label. Boil wagon gums for bursting green boils all over the face. Potty stir powder for unstoppable bowels. Rattlers to punish those who talk endlessly. Tickler Wickler tickle powder. Super sticks. Hoppers jumps for days. Twizzle tongue tonic to tie those nasty tongues. Naughty knots. Never let them free ropes. The mind would spin. I want you to hold that black container with both your hands, Kalam, ordered Professor Ramachandran, pointing at a whistle kept over sorry, pointing at a vessel kept over a high flame burner. This? Asked Kalam. Yes, yes, go ahead. Let me find my bottle of mercury. Without any hesitation to touch a vessel over a high flame, Kalam climbed onto a little tool and reached out to grab the container. And as if the burner was not on at all, Kalam's hand met with cold surface. Fascinating, he screamed, his head dancing up as he held on to the container's sides. Isn't it? Chuckled Professor Ramachandran, plonking himself on a chair by Kalam's side and grabbing the container himself, his head only inches away from the ceiling. You've invented a material that never heats up. A mix of metals. Do you remember the concoction we were brewing last week? It's that with a few tweaks. It's all in the notebook. With his white hair also standing up, Professor Ramachandran looked remarkably like Einstein in more cheerful clothes. I'll read it in a bit. Are we going to boil mercury in this for a final test? Asked Kalam, now jumping with excitement. Let's, said Professor Ramachandran, pouring the bottle's entire contents in it. That is the experiment. So they're holding on to the metal that never heats up, which they've invented. And that's Professor Ramachandran and Kalam, and the hair is standing up because of electricity. Okay. The silvery liquid swished around the sides of the container before settling down. Have you thought of a name for it, sir? Not yet. I was hoping you would help me with it. Perhaps a combination of all the metals we used. Let's see. We used aluminium, nickel, lead, a dash of rhodium powder, tungsten, niobium, zinc, Kalam counted, and bismuth. The two were so engrossed in remembering the list and coming up with a name that they did not notice the mere mercury boiling or the holes that were now appearing in the container, the mercury slipping out of it. Ouch! Screamed Professor Ramachandran as a drop splattered on his lap. The mercury was now running all over the floor. Kalam jumped up the slab and carefully moved sideways to the chemical cabinet. He grabbed the sulfur powder and threw it to Professor Ramachandran, who scattered it over the mercury to control it. The two heaved a sigh of relief as they watched the two elements bind together into a less poisonous mix. It seems like we need to put in some more work before we decide to name it, laughed Professor Ramachandran. For next time, the two climbed out of the makeshift laboratory, dirty and disheveled. Oh no, it's almost dinner time. Ammi is going to be furious. I'll drop you home and explain to her, said Professor Ramachandran. Kalam looked at their messy clothes and their standing up hair. He was sure no amount of explanation would help. It didn't take the two long to run to Kalam's house, where they saw the slim figure of his mother standing at the door, looking mighty mad. Ammi, not a word. Do you know what time it is? It's my fault. We lost track of time stammered Professor Ramachandran before he was cut off. Absolutely incorrigible. And look at you two. Kalam, these are new clothes you have dirtied. And torn, she said, pulling Kalam's shirt at the back. But Ammi, I helped Sir invent. Invent? invent the useless things you're up to when you could be helping Abu catch some fish. It's not a word. Go in now, she commanded, her lips a thin line. Kalam thought it best to hold his tongue and went in to join his family in the kitchen for dinner. Professor Ramachandran dropped his head and turned around to go back home, his hair still standing upright. That was chapter 5, and I'll see you soon for chapter 6. Take care. Bye.